Deepwokens' best attunement has changed significantly over time. In today's video, I will be going over the history of which attunements were the best at different points of time within Deepwokens' lifespan currently. Before we get into it, make sure to subscribe, since only about 20% of the people watching right now are actually subscribed. Also, there will be a new song cover up for YouTube members soon, so if you want to hear me sing, buy a YouTube membership. Now let's get into it. Upon Deepwokens' initial release, the two most popular attunements were Gale Breath and Flame Charm. Flame Charm was popular because it's just fire. Generally, in games with elemental systems, fire is seen as a safer, well-balanced pick. And that it is, but it wasn't the strongest. The strongest was by far Gale Breath, with the most popular Gale Breath build being popularized by Agamatsu, which was a heavy Pale Morning Gale Breath build, which that was pretty much it because talents didn't actually matter that much back then, and Shrine of Order just really wasn't a thing back then, so there was no way to really just really spec out and min-max all your builds. Gale Breath was extremely powerful for a lot of reasons back then. First of all, Gale Lunge was actually the only real chaser mantra in the game, making it necessary for chasing other Gale users or even just for running away if necessary. It was the most mobile mantra in the game, and Gale's extra mobility with its extra jump and movement bonuses that it had also made it just super good in general, but the actual attacking mantras were also insane, especially when paired with the Bloodless gem, which used to heal bars of health at a time back then. Mantras like Astral Wind would deal like a bar of damage and heal the user for just as much with a Bloodless gem. And then Gale Shot, which already did good damage, had the multiplying spark modifier, which made it into the Gale Shotgun, which was really popular back then and people even use now. But the difference is that back then each shot from the Gale Shotgun did equal damage to the original Gale Shot and healed as well, meaning hitting someone with a Gale Shotgun up close would nearly one-shot them, and if you had Bloodless Gem on it, then it would easily full heal you. Pretty early into Deepwokens' lifespan, the developers committed to balancing as well as they could. So obviously Gale, Heavy, and the Bloodless Gems would all be nerfed within the first month or so of Deepwokens' lifespan. On January 15th of 2022, Bloodless Gems would reduce move damage by 20% to any move that they're proccing on, as well as reducing the lifesteal by 20% as a byproduct from the lesser damage. Then later in February, there would be nerfs to Astral Wind's cooldown and damage, Wind Gun's Ether, cost, damage, and multiplying spark scaling, as well as the Ether cost and damage. And Gale Lunge's cooldown and distance were also nerfed. However, soon after, a new meta would arise with the realization of the strength behind the ice talent Frozen Pincushions. After Gale and Heavy had been pushed out of the meta, players realized that Frozen Pincushion and Ice Daggers were absolutely broken. They were actually a talent which was ripped off of NPCs and enemies which would use it on players, but the thing is they didn't really scale it or adjust it before making it a publicly obtainable talent, which is why when it would hit someone, it would freeze people for about 15 seconds or until hit, which realistically nobody is going to go 15 seconds without getting hit when they're literally frozen still. Along with other extremely powerful talents like Saint J, which hard countered the Curse of the No Life King enchant, which was a very popular enchant at the time due to how good the regen was, and as well as Ice Skates with Frozone, which gave you near infinite survivability because you move faster than anything else in the game. Ice would become meta for a while, however this wouldn't last too long. I also almost forgot to mention, but Ice Lance also used to just completely go through dodge and block frames, making it unavoidable in large-scale ganks unless you could somehow parry it, but most of the time in the overworld before Chime of Conflict existed, you'd probably be taking it from behind because you're in a 5v5 and you're not seeing the guy who's trying to sneak you. So overall, Ice was the strongest attunement for a long time. And by a long time, I mean a few months. But soon, most of these would be changed or severely nerfed, with Frozen Pincushion getting a massive nerf to its freeze time, and Ice Lance becoming both blockable and dodgeable. The only thing that remained consistent was Frozone and Ice Skates, which in my opinion don't belong in Deepwoken, and the only reason why it's not abused today is because Chime of Conflict is most people's preferred way to play the game, but this video is not on that. Regardless, after Ice's fall from grace, it was Thundercall's time for its meta spotlight. Around the time of Chime of Conflict and Trial of One came out, Thundercall was becoming meta mainly for one move, Lightning Cloak. At the time, Lightning Cloak was extremely powerful and everyone seemed to just love it because it was fun to use, but in its original form, it would drain Ether, which was easily counterable through talents like Neuroplasticity, which would make the Ether on it drain super slow, and a lot of people would just run builds that would give you more Ether. Even after they gave it a set duration, it didn't change much however, as Lightning Cloak still made you super fast and replaced replaced your dash with short-range teleports. In March of 2022, however, the devs would revert its duration change and make it based on Aether Drain again. It also now had modifiers which would decrease its drain, making it super strong. But Lightning Cloak isn't the only thing that was really strong in Lightning's kit. Grand Javelin was at one point completely unblockable for some reason, so a common build to see at this time was Legion Kata, Elasticity, Enchanted Cestus with Grand Javelin spam. Since old Legion Kata crit couldn't be blocked and the Lightning Cloak made it impossible to run from a Thundercall user, they would just spam M1 and crit until Elasticity procced, and then they would spam mantras and Grand Javelin on you until you died. And there was very little counterplay to this, which is why it was heavily abused. Eventually though, two major changes would happen. First of all, the nerfing of Thundercall and most of its mantras, such as Grand Javelin, which was made blockable, parryable, and dodgeable. Lightning Cloak's dashes got nerfed, and much more of its other mantras like Lightning Kick and Lightning Slashes were nerfed, which were also pretty good. But secondly, which really shifted the meta, was the nerf to Hero Blades. Hero Blades were at one point seen as the best weapon for any given elemental build, but once they were nerfed, they were no longer seen as such. This meant people had less incentive to use elements since the best weapons in the game were no longer elemental. This had caused the rise of attunement lists, making the attunement list skills extremely popular. While attunement lists lacked talents, it had some of the strongest mantras in the entire game. Strong Left, which is still good today, back then was unblockable, would stack posture even if you parried, and was hard to dodge because for some reason it used to have a weird double hitbox. Pressure Blast was just undodgeable because it was 4 moving hitboxes, unblockable or it would just posture break you, and unparryable because it had 4 moving hitboxes, making it a super strong and uncounterable move. And then there was Rapid Slashes, a high damaging teleport move for light users. It also didn't take long for attunement list users to realize that you only needed 6 points in a weapon stat to get its attunement list mantra, meaning many people would go for a little bit of points in each weapon stat, Pressure Blast, Rapid Slashes, and Medium of course for Master's Flourish, which used to guard break guaranteed, and if you had Bulldozer would wall combo people. Eventually all of the attunement list mantras would get nerfed, but this wasn't really what got attunement lists out of the meta. What really changed it was raising the requirements needed for them and making, Pressure Shift actually counterable. Like the entire point of that mantra was to be unavoidable, and making it avoidable kinda made it useless. But what really mattered was Master's Flourish and Rapid Slashes, which had their requirements raised, meaning you couldn't just put 6 points into a weapon stat and get those for free. And another popular talent for attunement list builds, which was the old Destructive Recovery, which would guard break people who you parried, got completely reworked, making attunement list heavy much worse. Along with nerfing the talent, Return to the Dark Ages, which reduced your damage taken and dealt with elements. But when you use attunement list, you didn't use an element, or at least people thought so back then, so its downside didn't seem to matter much. However, attunement list didn't leave the meta without its inspirations. Pretty much tied for attunement list in terms of strength was Shadow, and it was almost entirely because of the Crypt Blade heavy build. When Destructive Recovery still guard broke on parry and attunement list mantras were still extremely powerful, the meta was a mixture of heavy attunement list or shadow heavy with attunement list mantras like Pressure Blast. So along with the Darksteel Greatsword, we had Crypt Blade, until eventually both weapons got nerfed, making heavy a lot less viable. Along with that came the nerf of Destructive Recovery, and after this, heavy was basically completely out of the meta for a long time. Soon Flame Charm would become meta in the buggiest era of all of Deepwoken history, with Ash Slam Flame builds taking inspiration from the strength reliant attunement list builds. It wasn't uncommon to see everyone spamming Ash Slam, especially because back then people started to realize how much mantras could truly be modified, leading to the comically large mantras like the Planetary Burning Servants. But more important than that, if Ash Slam were modified enough, it would literally be larger than the entire Chime of Conflict arena. So while Flame was meta here, there were also a ton more broken modifiers to be found for other attunements. So Lightning had a lightning stream that would do 70% of your max health that had to have a hot fix in order to remove. Ice just had a lot of high damaging spam AoE multiplying spark moves. Like there were so many ice moves that just did way too much damage or had massive AoEs or just had like multiple hits that were unavoidable. And basically everything but Gale had a super broken gimmick at some point within this period. I guess you could say Astral Wind was doing a lot of damage, but it didn't really matter if Astral Wind did a bit more damage than usual when Lightning Stream, a utility mantra, was doing 70% of your health in one hit. In fact, for a long time, Gale was considered the weakest attunement with a lack of actual releases for good mantras and with constant nerfs, which is where the Buff Flame nerf Gale meme came from. Regardless, once all these bugs were patched out, the attunements would already remain relatively balanced for a long time, with the exception of Gale being mediocre since the curved blade of wind wouldn't get reworked until July 10th of 2022, when it would get its new models and reworked crits. Regardless, in March of 2023, Silent Heart would release. This once again made attunementless meta, but not in the same way that it was before, because the difference here wasn't because of the mantras, because Silent Heart didn't have mantras. It was simply just better than anything else in the game because of the way the oath worked. If you can't use mantras, and the guy you're fighting can't use mantras, but at the time you're doing 15% more damage and have extra moves, then you're just going to win. Spamming ankle cutter and uppercuts was the meta for a while until Silent Heart got nerfed like a week after it came out, because it was just really good. They had to nerf it in pretty much every aspect possible. And even now, it's still good, so imagine how good it was when it first came out if you didn't experience it. Especially because everyone was abusing a glitch that let you have mantras with Silent Heart for like the first few days when it was out, which that was really stupid. After Silent Heart was nerfed, everything was generally balanced, but this all changed on May 22nd of 2023. When the Iron Sing attunement was added to Deepwoken, with what is clearly minimal PvP testing. The mantras for Iron Sing were broken from the start. Metal Armament would punish people for trying to punish you for swinging, since it would swing if you swung no matter what, meaning whether or not you hit, or if you parried, or if you got parried, or if you just missed, the other person would take damage if they didn't dodge away. And then Metal Ball had a knockdown time of 1 second, making it crazy for combo starting since it was fast, had no startup, had no end lag, and would true stun and true combo into any move in the game. And then there was Needle Barrage, which just did a ton of damage, and Iron Slam did a ton of damage, and with modifiers could quadruple in size. And then the Jailer Path was just used to like cheese people in Chime by sticking them outside of the little arena AoE and killing them. Iron Sing was so strong, in fact, that the Deepwoken devs had to do hot fixes for 4 days in a row in order to nerf Metal Ball's stun time and make Metal Armament not swing unless you already hit someone, and nerf all the other mantras because of how good it was. Overall, Iron Sing wasn't broken for a long time, but the Iron Sing mantras that were broken were definitely very broken and potentially some of the most broken in all of Deepwoken history. However, over a few weeks' time, the game would become balanced again after some good balancing readjustments from the dev team. But then on June 5th of 2023, the Storm's Eye was added to the game. Many of you may recognize this as the weapon I skip over in every video whenever it comes up in any topic, but I can't this time. Regardless, the Storm's Eye was important for 2 reasons. First of all, people started to realize how good rifles actually are. Second of all, the Storm's Eye is a Thundercall legendary, and on release it was really good. This first of all made Thundercall gain popularity again, but also with the new understanding of how good spamming your R key with a rifle is, Silent Heart rifle builds began to get newfound popularity, meaning the 2 strongest attunements or builds in this game at the time were Thundercall Storm's Eye, where you basically hold F and S and spam ranged attacks, or Silent Heart Rifle, where you hold S and also spam ranged attacks. The Storm's Eye, however, was completely changed on October 13th of 2023, when they made it turn blurple. No, I'm joking. It got nerfed when they removed the rifle bullet usage, which significantly decreased the damage of all rifles. Since true ether bullets with normal bullets made the guns do way more damage, the removal of this was a big downgrade to the damage, which kind of bumped them out of the meta in exchange for a few other things, mainly Flame Charm and Gale Breath. The Curved Blade of Wind's rework was finally getting its time to shine and was getting noticed by people, and people started realizing how good Gale is again. Who knew? And then Light's Final Toll also scaled well with Flame Charm, so for a long time the Light's Final Toll was meta. The reason was because it scaled on willpower, and Azure Flame needed willpower, so by going Flame Charm you basically got Azure Flames for free, since its requirement is part of your build anyway. In fact, I actually still have this build, so even if it's not so good anymore, I still use it whenever I very rarely play the game, which brings us into why it's not so good anymore. On March 22nd of 2024, the scaling for willpower was reduced, and onto the Light's Final Toll was light weapon scaling, meaning you needed an entirely new stat for a Light's Final Toll build. And this was such a stupid update. They reduced the willpower scaling and added light weapon scaling. Whichever dev thought to do this instead of either just lowering the scaling or adding light scaling or reducing the damage, you suck at your job. This update single-handedly made every Light's Final Toll build irreparably damaged, so the only way to have a viable LFT build after this was to wipe and remake your build, because Shrine of Order wasn't going to cut it. It would not bring you to optimal stat combinations. The Light's Final Toll went from top 3 weapons to like bottom 5 pretty quick. Regardless, Flame still had its place in the meta with Rapier, and soon after the Isli's Firekeeper, which today is generally considered one of the best weapons in the entire game, which is what's keeping Flame Charm near the top. Technically not a flame weapon as well, but the Rail Blade, which is commonly used with flame, was buffed to become enchantable. To those of you using the Rail Blade now with Flame Charm builds, you owe me a thank you because I'm the reason the Rail Blade is now enchantable. I made a video, it was added a week later. Regardless, the most prevalent attunements today are actually all of them. Everything in Deepwoken is currently in a really good state, with most attunements being very well balanced, allowing for lots of build diversity in today's meta, except for attunementless. I know I forgot to mention the whole Grand Sudaruska ice meta period, but I just really don't want to talk about that, especially because it lasted like 2 days. Like, actually 2 days. That weapon got nerfed so hard with crystallization. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed. If I missed any other eras or metas, drop in the comments below. I'll be dropping a new song cover for YouTube members soon, so tap in. Shoutouts to Kenix, Jake, Drizzy, Drake Fan, and of course, Cyberboy21. I love you all, and goodbye.